Let's talk about the SOLER technique, and this is one of my favorite techniques, and this is described on page 2. And let me first say that SOLER is an acronym that stands for the following. The S stands for square, the O is open, the L is lean, the E is eye contact, and the R is relaxed. And I'm going to demonstrate each of these elements in terms of something you can do to reduce noise and increase the likelihood you can connect effectively.
What was R again?
R is relaxed.
Relaxed.
Relaxed. The S is square, and it's based on a very simple notion. And Julie, could you help me out for a second? Could you just stand up for a second? And let's stand, why don't you face me here? Square is based on the idea that in circumstances in which the potential for noise is high, and it could be any type of noise, you can minimize or you can increase the likelihood that you minimize noise by standing with your shoulders square to the person you're having a conversation with. And it probably is pretty obvious why that would be of benefit. We can see each other more effectively. There's a good chance of understanding or a better chance of understanding nonverbal behavior and movements and things of that nature. We can connect more effectively. We're more likely to make eye contact in terms of this particular stance. Now, the reality is this is not how human beings interact for the vast majority of time. In fact, you know what we do most of the time? We actually, if you rotate this a little bit, we have a tendency to frequently stand this way and talk out into space. And I want to be real clear about this. I'm not suggesting that you have to square up every single time you have a conversation. In fact, I'm going to suggest you don't do that because people think you're strange. If you're always trying to go around squaring it up and squaring it up, and you're like squaring it up, it's like, what are you doing? Stop this.
Are we dancing?
Yes, exactly. Are we dancing? You know, you don't need to do that. But I am going to suggest to you that in instances in which the chances of noise are elevated, you might want to seriously think about squaring up with your partner. Now, since you're standing here, the other part of S is space, because you mentioned space, which is really good. And I'm going to ask Julie a question. That is, how do you feel right now?
Invaded! No, I'm teasing. A little too close.
Do you think this might create some noise in the interaction?
Yes.
Is Julie going to listen to a word I have to say? No. Now, how many people have had their space invaded like this? It happens all the time. And the reality and what I want you to understand, thank you. Give Julie a hand for being a good sport. The reality is that different people and different cultural groups have different expectations when it comes to space. In fact, when you think about this from a worldwide perspective, and I'm talking generally, I'm not talking, it's not every person, but generally speaking, in the United States, we have the widest space expectations on Earth. There is no other country or no other culture on Earth whose space expectations are as wide as ours are. To compare and contrast that, in many, for example, traditionally Latin or Asian countries, and with many traditional Latin and Asian cultures, the space requirement is much shorter. The expectations are that you stand much closer to each other when you're having a conversation. And you can see how this causes problems. I actually had watched a video, this was a long time ago, many years ago, that was fascinating because it showed people, business people, in traditionally Latin cultures and U.S. culture interacting with each other. And as you might expect, people in U.S. culture actually got comfortable with maybe about 2.5, 3 feet of space between them. But people from Latin cultures, they were uncomfortable because it wasn't close enough. So what did they do? They stepped forward. And what did people in U.S. culture do? Step back. And what did the person in Latin culture do? Step forward. And then what did the U.S. person do? Step back. And over a period of 15 or 20 minutes, you literally saw people dancing with each other all over the room because they could never get comfortable in terms of proper space. So the point I want to make is be mindful that if someone steps inside your personal space, it's not because they're trying to do anything inappropriate or because they have something wrong with them. It could simply be a cultural difference.